All right, here we go. We're starting to get some folks in. We're going to be talking about if you like your job or not. We're going to go over a whole bunch of different things as far as career statistics, what you can do if you hate your job, all that good stuff. What do you do for work? So share that. I'm in the US. Share what you do for work. Tell me if you like it. We're going to start this thing in just a few seconds. We're going to talk about a ton of different statistics when it comes to work, and if people like their work, what you can do. If you don't like your work, you're a grill cook. I don't know if you said, do you like that? If not, you're just going to come here. You're going to be a grill cook for me. That'd make me happy at least. Awesome. All right, well, let's get this thing going. What do y'all say? A beauty consultant. Don't like it anymore. Okay, now the question is why? And according to the research, there's a couple of reasons. One, probably the most likely reason is you don't like your boss or the company culture. Those are usually the two reasons why people quit their job. It's not even what you would think as far as financial. You're a support practitioner, so do you like it? Theft is high. Yeah, it seems like everywhere theft is high right now. Oh, that's super cool. Teaching choir. All right. All right, folks, welcome to Evan the Counselor Live. I'm Evan the Counselor. Today we're doing a special live episode, and I do call this Evan the Counselor Live. And this time we are actually live, so we have the TikTok stream going, and today is all about careers and mental health. So many times, when I'm working with clients, one of the biggest issues, one of the biggest stressors they have is their work. So I did a bunch of, quote, research. I looked at a lot of statistics around worker satisfaction. Why is it that people are happy in their jobs? Why are they not happy? What are some of the trends? So we're going to be going over a whole bunch of those different things. And on the live stream here, there's a background behind me. And if you're listening to just the podcast audio, you won't be able to see it, but it just says, do you like your job? So for those of you coming in, I want to hear about, do you like your job and what do you do? And as we go through, we'll talk about some of the different statistics, maybe some of the things you could do about it if that is the case, that you don't actually like your job. So someone piped in earlier and they said, I believe they work in a retail setting, beauty consultant. They said they don't like it anymore. And I asked them why. And one of the guesses that I had based on some of the research I've done is that some of the biggest reasons people do not like their job is not because of pay, even though that can be a big reason, but it's actually a pretty small percentage when you compare it to things like the culture of the company and your boss, as well as your coworkers too. And then the other big thing is whether or not you're appreciated. So we'll hit some of those statistics. And that actually brings up another one, because the startup is uncertain. Now, that's also one of the biggest factors of people not liking their career is uncertainty. So people really appreciate benefits, and the more benefits they have, the more inclined they are to like their job, because security is very important. 100%, my boss makes me hate my job. I've done that for 11 years. So yeah, that's just another example of somebody who does not like their job because of their boss. So let's look at some of these statistics. I wish I had them in some sort of order because I have so many of them. So again, like I said before, only 12% of people leave their jobs to make more money, according to Forbes. Now, and a lot of people complain about the pay and how important that is, but I also do some, as part of my day job, I've had a company where we do recruiting. So I've spoken with hundreds and hundreds of people who are seeking jobs, hearing about what they want, hear about what they're looking for. And pay is important, but according to this, it may not be as important. Now, I think what's probably more important is somebody feeling not like they're not getting paid it, but basically, feeling like they're not getting paid enough, like in comparison to the standard. And there's just some careers that in general, people just do not get paid enough, but in comparison to others, that's pretty normal, right? Like a teacher, notoriously underpaid for the amount of stress, education you need, unfortunately becomes a norm. Now, however, if you're working at a school that pays you significantly less than somewhere else, the money, of course, is important, but a lot of times that is a sign of being underappreciated. And that makes a lot of sense to me, because when you look at the psychology around relationships, around persuasion, around how to communicate with people, one of the top factors in people let's say just liking you or wanting to work for you, is that they appreciate you. All right, so Day Naking says you hate your job, you hate it. So what is it you do, and why is it that you hate your job? And let's see if that matches up. So I thought I hated my job because of pay. This is someone else, Nicole. I put in my resignation and got a raise to stay. Okay, that's awesome, but that didn't fix it, right? So again, sometimes we think it's because of the pay, right? But a lot of times it comes down to being appreciated. So why was it that you felt like your job wasn't good enough for you? In this case, you got a raise, but it still wasn't enough. So before we do that, you work in an emergency room, you work with a lot of people's big egos, and there's no appreciation. See, that's a bummer. A lot of healthcare workers, right? And sometimes you'll see that correlated with rates of addiction. So yeah, so you often see that with rates of addiction when people are dissatisfied in their job. For example, the career with the number one highest rates of addiction are lawyers, right? So a lot of people report that they are not happy, not satisfied with that position. So some of the jobs that people are happiest, so let's go through the list: clergy, chiropractors, CEOs, dentists, conservation scientists, medical and health services managers, firefighters, HR managers, physicians, nurses, which that one surprised me a little bit because I think that one really depends. You know, I feel like people feel passionate about their jobs, but that one, it really depends on where they're working and how appreciated they feel at their work. Physical therapists, teachers, software developers. Now imagine with software developers, a lot of times there's a lot of freedom. And that's another big one too for people where they work. And if they like it, is how much freedom do they have? Psychologists and surgeons. So that's an interesting one too. So a big factor too is the question is how many people live to work, how many people work to live? So Aries, a fellow Aries here, you're overworked, underpaid, but you love what you do, but no benefits. So that's interesting because, right, there's a few different factors there. Benefits are extremely important for people who like their job. Having benefits, having their health care paid for, having that sense of security is really big. And sometimes even if you like compare it to how much money those benefits are even worth, oftentimes it may be worth less than getting paid somewhere else. However, maybe there's some psychology around that, some security around that. Therefore, you may like your job more. So a certain percentage of people feel like their purpose is through their job. They feel like their job provides them, that they feel like they're passionate about it. Now that is about 20 to 30% of people are passionate about their job. And another, I think like 40 or so percent, another 30 or 40% of people just tolerate their job or they like their job, but they don't find that they're passionate about it. However, it gives them something that enables them to do what they want outside. So you love your job, you're passionate, the psychic medium. So is that your full-time job? Are you a psychic medium? And if that's the case, let's see if you have any insights for me. That'd be pretty interesting to hear. We'll get a psychic reading on live, and maybe it hits me between the eyes, and then I'll just start crying. So we talk about different things like company culture. So 74% of employees believe that the company culture is one of the biggest contributing factors to job satisfaction. So what does that mean, company culture, right? Sometimes that can come down to how much you're valued. How much work do you do? Does everyone at work overtime? Is that the norm? Coming in early, working more than what they're contracted for? The feedback that you get, the feedback that you give to others, right? So many of those different things are, associated with one's company culture. And for a lot of people, that's important. So as far as job satisfaction goes, about 60, and I may have mentioned this before, about 60 to 65% of people are happy with their current job, which actually surprised me a little bit. I thought it would, if I had to guess, I think I would have guessed like 40%, maybe 30% were really satisfied with their job. And one of those other ones, and here's an interesting statistic, we touched on this, is hating your boss, right? A very significant amount of people leave their work because they do not like their boss. So 75% of people quit work because they don't like their boss. Another factor that people look at as far as the importance of, how you view your job is looking at how that correlates with productivity. So a very high percentage of people, it's something like 70% of people are disengaged with their job. Right, so it's kind of interesting because if 60% like it, but half of those people are not really engaged in what, so maybe they like it, but maybe they're not as excited about what they're doing. They feel disengaged. And that actually is a significant factor in work productivity. So if you're somebody that employs people, right, so not everyone coming in here are going to be employees. You may be an employer, you may be a manager. But that's something to know, is how much do your employees feel appreciated? How inspired do they feel? Because if they do, their productivity is going to be way higher. Here's a fun statistic. 45% of employees believe they have gained weight at their current job. So almost half of people believe that because of their job, they have gained weight. Now, maybe that's because they're not moving around as much. But I think, if you're sitting at a desk, but also a lot of times we neglect self-care, right? We do not take care of ourselves with a diet, exercising outside of work. And one of the reasons I find that is the case with people is that they are tired, right? So if you're feeling overworked, right, the last thing you want to do when you get off work is exercise, or you're feeling tired and you don't want to wake up early and do it. So that's going to contribute to your overall health, your overall satisfaction. Your boss underestimates me. This is not too hurtful, but still disappointed, says Haizu. We're just going to pretend that's how to pronounce it. So what if my boss underestimates me? Now, that's a good question, because that, I think, would fall under the category of how appreciated are you, right? So if you feel like somebody undermines you, what do you say, undermines? Oh, that's Jessica who says that. So if your boss undermines you, doesn't appreciate you, right, that is going to be a huge factor. That's one of the biggest reasons we talked about why people don't like their job. And that goes a long way, and especially for you employers, I think that's one of the number one reasons, or one of the ways you can most motivate your employees, is giving them compliments. Now, there's a famous book called How to Make Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and I'm sure a lot of you all have heard about that. And that's one of the things he talks about, is just the importance of showing appreciation for other people. That will go a long way. They will work harder for you. Not that you want to use that in a manipulative way per se, but I remember from times that I was an employee, like I worked for this one family, early in my career, and it's just as like an extra part-time job, and I was working with a kid with disabilities. It was really tough. Even just, working with this one kid who had really severe behavioral issues, and it was really stressful because it created a lot of stress among the family, and we were all really cool with each other, but sometimes we would all just be stressed out. And at the end of the day, I could be like, God damn, that was horrible. Why am I doing this? But I remember that when they would compliment me, because sometimes it would feel like I was unappreciated because they would maybe get a little short. They would maybe be critical of what I did. But at the end of the day, often they were like, wow, you did a good job. And I'm like, really? Didn't seem like you felt like I did a good job. But, that really motivated me to stay at a job that was more stressful than what I would have wanted, right? But I also liked the family, and that was another reason why I wanted to stay, was the quality of the relationships I had with my employer, and in some ways coworkers, because we're working side to side. Should you give feedback when you quit? I think that's up to you. I think it is a good thing, right? Because the question, when you have a difficult question, sometimes one of the best things that I recommend asking is this helpful? So would this be helpful when I quit my job to provide feedback to my employer? Now, there's a couple reasons why it may be helpful. One is to get something off your chest. Yes, Jessica, 401k is a retirement fund. Maybe you have something different in Australia. But you get that off your chest, right? You're holding in some of this anger and resentments, and maybe you can, provide that feedback, and that could be beneficial. I find a lot of people like doing that, because it gives them a chance to voice something that they didn't feel like they were able to before, right? Because they're worried about their job, but now you're not worried about losing your job because you're already leaving. So maybe you feel more compelled, more like you have a voice, and could share that. Now, the other reason that I think it is helpful to provide feedback is, often you care about some of the people that you've worked with, right? So some of the reasons why you may not like or appreciate your job is often why others don't, right? So sometimes if you are able to give that feedback, that will help some of your coworkers as well, right? And maybe you do care about your boss on some level. Maybe you didn't love working with them, but maybe on a human level, and maybe that could be beneficial, to give them feedback. So that's a really good question. I think that is beneficial to give your work feedback when you quit. Just your job is mentally what? Remind me. You may have said, "What are you doing now?" I know you're historically a nurse. And someone, yeah. So let's hit a couple more the statistics. We talked about being disengaged, more than half being disengaged at work. We talked about 12% of people leaving their jobs because for more money, which is way less than you'd guess. I would have guessed it was over 50% for sure. 81% of employees in the legal industry find their job boring and dissatisfying. We talked about before, and I've done this in some of my videos, how lawyers have the highest rate of addiction than any other group. And when I did that, it was really interesting. When I did that post, a lot of people were like, well, what about, veterans? What about military? And I was like, that's a good question. Why wasn't that on the list? And as I looked into it, I think people are often more happy when they are in the military, but when they get out, there's a whole bunch of reasons why. A lot of times that's when your PTSD peaks, is actually when you're out of the situation. When you lose this sense of purpose, and we talked about how important that could be. How 30 or 40% of people find purpose in the work they're doing, so that when they're no longer doing it, things get really quiet. They're used to a really high stimulation environment, so they get essentially bored, and feel like they don't have that purpose. And one of the other reasons that kind of get people through those tough experiences in the military is camaraderie. And when you become a veteran, you lose that sense of camaraderie. So that was an interesting one that came up when we did that post. So yeah, 80% of people who quit their job feel undervalued. 60% of employees believe their coworkers are the biggest contributor to their happiness at work. So that's interesting. So on a positive note, that goes back to that camaraderie piece. Yeah. So some people, and maybe, and I don't know the satisfaction that people have in the military, but when it comes to the addiction piece, and that's one of the other reasons too in the military that there's lower rates. I know that there's a lot of drinking that goes on, but they're really strict, zero tolerance on drug use. So if you get caught, you're out, and there's a lot of consequences for that. 93% of people will stay longer at their organization that invests in their career growth. So I think that would fall under benefits as well, right? If, let's say, your employer pays for part of your tuition, if they pay for additional education and programming, that is a really good benefit. And I've seen that as well with recruiting, especially in the mental health field. Will they, pay for grad school? Will they pay for continuing education? That's a huge benefit. Will they provide supervision for your licensure? So let's see if we could hit a couple other statistics. While this 50% of, this is an interesting one, 57% of employees who work from home are more satisfied. And I feel like the numbers would be higher. Most people I talk to who work from home are happier because it provides them more freedom. So I think that's really beneficial as well. So there is evidence-based interventions. I think, however, some folks are better than others in every job. And I think with psychiatry, there's a lot at stake, with your mental health. So if you feel like you didn't have a good therapist, psychiatrist. So we talked about that. 72% of respondents claim that the work benefits they have, the happier they are with their job. Companies with high employee satisfaction rates offer perks like working from home. Right, so that's what I was saying before. So I was surprised that I feel like that 56% number is low. So for those of you who are just joining, please let us know. Do you like your job? What is it that you do? And remember that you could always check this out on YouTube or my podcast, probably posted next week, where we've been talking about all these different statistics. And so whether you're an employee looking for a new job, thinking about looking for a new job, or an employer who wants, employer or manager who wants more productivity out of their employees and more satisfaction, you should definitely be sure to check this out. And we're going to continue to highlight and go back over some of these. So I was just talking about managers. So it's pretty interesting because actually managers report a higher level of satisfaction than employees, and that makes sense because maybe you're higher up. Sometimes you have more flexibility, but I also know that managers, especially like in retail, have a lot of pressure. And I think, don't quote me on this, but I believe I saw that, retail restaurant workers are often report lower levels of job satisfaction. That's a funny one. Therapists fear their patients get better because they get paid less. I wouldn't say that's true, right? If you're a therapist, you're probably not doing it for the money. And you could say that about anything, or about any doctor, like, well, they have an incentive for their patients to be sick. But I don't think that's the case, because people take pride in what they do, right? You want to be good at what you do, right? And there's a lot of there's more benefits for being good at what you do. And a lot of times, as therapists, we know that people are often going to come and go. Hopefully that's because they're getting better. And right now, usually, therapists, especially right now, there's such a shortage of mental health professionals that, let's just say you have your own business, you have your own practice, that if people leave, there's going to be other people, right? We have like a waiting list, a lot of people. So yeah, so more, like we said, only 12% of people leave their jobs because of the money. So it's not everything. And we're going to talk about in a little bit how much money is too little, and what is the relationship between how much money you make and how happy you are. Because it's pretty interesting. Maybe some of you have heard of some of these statistics. Some of them get disputed, but it's pretty interesting because you would think that the higher you're paid, the happier you're going to be in life in general, and not just with your job satisfaction. And that's true. Josh says inflation is killing everyone, right? Because often when it comes to wages, like lately when you've seen wage growth, like that's, typically a good thing. However, when the cost of goods go up, sometimes you functionally, cost of goods, cost of rent, you're functionally making less than you did before. Jess, you're overpaid. Jess, if you don't mind, would you feel free to share with us? If you don't want to, that's fine. But how much you make in Australia? Because you often see that with a lot of the other developed countries, that they tend to make more wages, but you also get more benefits. Sometimes you pay higher taxes. So you're nurse to elderly people with dementia, thankless at times, empathy running dry. But Emma, at the end of the day, do you like your job despite the stressors? So I'd be interested to know that. So anyway, you get paid $36 an hour. Yeah, that's pretty damn good. That's about what a nurse may start at, around here, which could be pretty good, because 36, that's, about 80K a year. But, you start picking up overtime. You had to cancel your health insurance this year. Whoa, what happened there? You want to be a clinical psychologist in California? Go for it. Why not? If that's what you want to do. Typically with a psychologist, right, that's a lot of schooling. Usually after the first, I think 3 or 4 years, you start going into your internship programs that are paid, and that would be more frequent than people in the master's level. So you would get paid. You're not getting paid a ton, and it tends to be more expensive unless you're going to major university, which are harder to get into, to get a PhD versus a PsyD. Most people go the PsyD route, and that is like a psychologist minus the research part of it. A PhD is more research based, but just like a lot of PhDs, you do get a stipend from your school, and it may not cost you anything. However, I would say if that's what you want to do, go for it. Just know that the schooling will be more expensive. Most people will take out loans. However, when you come out on the other end, you will make more money. And if that is the case, it will be worth the investment over time, even though you are paying much more. Let's say 110, 120,000, 100,000 compared to, like, let's say a master's program, 30, 40,000. If you go to a private school, it's way more. I always recommend, especially at just the master's level, that you really factor in the cost more than maybe you would otherwise. Because if it's like, I've seen some people pay like 60, 70,000, 80,000 for a master's at a private school because they like the program, that's fine, but that is a significant amount of money. It's one of the reasons why I chose to go to the University of Minnesota, because it is a state school. And it was cheaper than some of the other private schools that also had good programs. So, I mean, I felt like most of the programs were pretty comparable. And so I think the cost factor did weigh a little bit more in that situation. So, the question is, how much is that program? How much better is it really than some of the other comparable programs? Because again, when you get out of school and it's time to start paying that debt, that creates a lot of stress, right? So companies with higher worker satisfaction, we talked about how important satisfaction is to actual job performance and job productivity. Companies that have higher work satisfaction outperform other companies by over 200%. Right? So again, for those of you employers or those of you who are managers, remember that. And just to go over it again for you folks in here, some of the biggest factors is not money, but it's appreciation. And sometimes money correlates with appreciation. If you're getting paid more, you do appreciate it. So I think that is a factor. But how much you like your boss, how much you feel appreciated by your boss, how much you like your coworkers, how much you are... the benefits that you get, feeling like they're investing in you, feeling that sense of security, the company culture. Those are all some of those things to think about. Are there better areas for you to be a clinical psychologist than California? You just have to look into it of what you get paid. I mean, I know people who are. I don't know if it would be that much different. I think it just depends on where you want to live. I'm sure there are some places out there where the pay to cost of living ratio would probably be better than California. But typically, I'm guessing you would make a little bit more, and it depends on what you're doing. So, yeah, that is something to look into. I don't know for sure, but I do know some psychologists in California. And hey, when you're living by the beach, that is a good question between millennial and Gen Z employees. So, I haven't had a lot of experience with Gen Z employees. Because usually the people that I'm hiring, God, stop flashing. A lot of the people that I'm hiring, are going to be a little older, right? These are folks who have been through grad school. I have had a couple Gen Z employees. I find that there is a lot of, and a lot of it is deserved, but there is a lot of, this growing attitude of, hating the man and hating, your employer, and, maybe not having a sense of, any kind of loyalty. And I think that loyalty should, in fact, be earned. But, I've had some good, some bad experiences with the Gen Z folks. And I can't say that it is, I don't have a high enough sample size to say this is a Gen Z thing, because some of them are really hard workers. But I think there is a general attitude of, just a general dislike of your employer that, why am I working for them? They're making money off of me. So like you were asking here, how do you earn your employers or your employees' loyalty? Well, that is through appreciation, right? Like that's like as far as what's in your control, it's appreciating your employees, showing them that you value what they do, providing them with security, providing them with good benefits, with decent enough pay, at least to the point where they don't feel underappreciated, right? So those are some of the things that I think will correlate with loyalty and a decrease in turnover rate. Because that's one thing when we're working with companies is how do you decrease your turnover rate? Because that is, extremely, extremely expensive to have turnover. So when it comes back to Gen Z, so and I think too, I don't know, I think there's a couple. Let's look at it from both sides. This may not be the popular opinion, and it may just sound like an old curmudgeon, or people don't have a sense of loyalty these days. But everyone says that about the generation before, and sometimes these are just younger people. I think with millennials, I saw a statistic here that 45% of millennials are completely satisfied with their job or career path. Now that's comparing to closer to 60 with the general population. So that's a little less so. So, right now we're having Gen Z who are starting to enter the job market, and we'll see. But a lot of times too, I think that, despite some of the sentiments and culture of hating your boss and feeling, exploited, because at the end of the day, so let's say I hire folks, right? Now, as an employer, right, if I'm not making a certain amount of money off your labor, right, then the company can't survive, right? And then there can't really be a company, right? So I can't provide jobs unless the company is profitable, so it's like, okay, so I'm making this amount of money for you. Why should I be? Well, it's like, look, at the end of the day, one, as an employer, if you have a company, you're assuming all the risks. So, I mean, there's been actually many times where, especially in the startup, the employees are actually making more than me because I'm not taking any money out of the business. So that is actually happens more frequently, and you don't think about all the overhead and the risk that there is. So I think we need to take a more balanced view of that now. However, to their credit, what you're seeing more and more of is, companies who are more cutthroat, especially at some of the bigger companies, right? They just look at you as a number. They don't appreciate you. They're willing to cut you or, fire you or replace you, right? There's not really like a humanistic approach. It's all about the bottom dollar. So you're seeing a lot of that and, less unions and that kind of thing. And so, so I think a lot of employers have gotten a bad reputation, sometimes for a reason, especially, if they are actually exploiting their workers, right? And so, like for me, as someone who is now an employer, having some of that attitude, does not help. I find that, again, when I've hired contractors for the most part, it's much harder. Like I'm hiring a part-time or a contractor because, again, when you look at these statistics, this is what I've found is that benefits are so important. And even if I'm paying that contractor more, because sometimes I'm like, look, I could give you benefits, but, I'm going to be paying you less. And first of all, you're going to get more taken out in taxes. And the extra money you're making, you could purchase a good health insurance plan. So for me, like I've usually worked, I've been in a fortunate position, but I've usually chosen to work as a contractor. I'll pay for my own health insurance, because you get more tax write-offs and that kind of thing. But a lot of people just don't give a crap about that, right? They don't want to think about that. But then also you're forgoing PTO and that kind of thing. But as a contractor, you have more freedom, and that's something that I value more is freedom. So that is another big factor for people liking their job is the amount of freedom that you have. Like another big reason why people hate their jobs is due to the commute, right? So these things are all that add stress. So I think that really, especially nowadays after the pandemic, people are valuing much more the ability to work at home. And I've been finding that too, as far as recruitment goes, is that almost everyone asks, can I work from home? Can I work from home part time? Right? Because that gives you more flexibility, especially, let's say, if you have kids, you're able to take care of more, and it creates less stress, takes away from the commute time. I had to adjust to that when I went to working from home, because I'm like, all right, I get another 30 minutes. Should I be more productive or sleep? And it's hard not to sleep more. But I mean, that could be a good thing too, because, your stress levels, when you get better sleep, your stress levels go down, you're physically healthier, you get sick less. So I think there is that advantage of sleeping more, but, still. But yeah, kind of back to that with like the attitude. But no, I would have been tempted to say that, let's say, people who are younger tend to be like flakier. But the more I've looked into it, the more, and I think it's like also this like older, like, oh, the younger generation, or they're on their phones too much. But then you go and you look at like these boomers, and they're on their phones just as much, right? So it's just a matter of complaining. But I have found that, even with like older employees, like there just is more of a culture of flakiness and people not following through on what they say that they're going to do. And I mean, I see that like on personal levels, I see that on professional levels. So, and I don't know why that is. Maybe there's more of an impersonality. Things not as personal nowadays. I don't know, but I think also there's that attitude of, F my employer, F the man kind of thing. So, yeah. So Mama asked, do I specialize in addictions? I do. Yep. So that is one of my specialties. That's actually the area I've worked in the longest, is addiction. But yeah, also mental health, PTSD, sexual health, gender, all those kind of things I really enjoy. But general mental health as well. So I see all sorts of different folks. Like we said, well, I guess it was more a little, 51% of Americans get their sense of identity from their job. So that's another interesting one too, with the live to work or work to live. And I don't know, I've always told people, like, I don't know which is better. I don't think either is better. It's just, let's say you live to work. You're passionate about what you do. Well, that is going to make you happier, because we all know that a sense of purpose in life is a really big factor in how happy you are. And so you have that going for you, but then let's say work to live. I always say, look, you don't have to find a job you're most passionate about. Maybe it would lead to higher satisfaction if you find a job that enables you to do what you are passionate about outside of work, because a lot of people have passions outside of their work that have nothing to do with their job. So I say, in that case, just find a job that you don't hate. Find something that you enjoy. Maybe it's not your passion, but it's something you enjoy doing, or at the very least do not hate doing, and you're doing it for a reason. Like, okay, why am I showing up? Why am I suffering, with work? I heard a funny quote. It's like, work is work because you wouldn't do it if you didn't get paid, right? So it's like, well, why am I doing this? Well, it gives me a lot of freedom. Let's say, I do this job, because I'm good at it. I'm appreciated. It pays me what I need to sustain my lifestyle. But, it's not my passion, but I don't hate it, right? And then when I'm done, I get to use that money I make or whatever, and, have a lake house. And here in Minnesota, it's like, yeah, you got the cabin and the pontoon boat, and I get to go fishing, whatever those things that you love to do outside of work. So I don't necessarily think one is particularly better than the other, but it's, those variables we talked about. How appreciated are you? The company culture, the freedom, the flexibility you get, the safety, the security. My dad told me to build work history based on my major career, but others disagree. So what would be the context of this? Because it depends, what do you want to do? Like, what is your ultimate goal? Because usually, like, if someone's making a resume, Like, I don't recommend, unless there's like significant gaps in work, it's like you don't need to put every job, like going back to the time you were like a lifeguard in high school, right? Like for someone like me who is employing people or recruiting people for others, like I'm mainly looking at that work history that is relevant. And so I don't know what the advantage would be to doing stuff outside of that, unless you're like, I'm trying to go into a different career. So you want to be in the psychology field. So yeah, if you want to be in the psychology field, absolutely. Like before I got licensed in anything, like one of the earliest things that I did, and I was able to put this on my resume, was like, let's say, working with kids with autism, doing that at a summer camp, doing stuff with people with disabilities, then working in addiction treatment centers as a support staff, as a tech, right? And that not only helped me like get a job, but that also I learned a lot. So that really does matter, I think, outside of just like what looks good on a resume. Jennifer, good to see you. Thanks for joining. We will see you in a couple weeks. So, instead of just, how that looks, it's what do I learn? Because then when I went to get my addiction license, I was, a step ahead of the game just because I had a couple years experience working at a treatment center, and then I worked at a psych hospital, which, that is a ton of experience too. And, yeah, so I really felt like when I was going into that school program that I was a bit ahead of the game because some of the stuff I did know. So yeah, no problem. That was a great, really good question, really relevant. I wouldn't have thought of that per se, but yeah. So I don't know. That would be my 2 cents, and that's just my experience based off of my work experience, hiring people, etc. All right. So the last question. Psych hospital, grippy sock jail. Well, at least sometimes you get a trophy at the end. You get to take home some grippy socks. And hopefully, no one likes being in the psych unit. And I very much well know that from my experience working there. No one's happy to be there. But, hopefully there was some purpose to it that, kept you safe for a bit. And hopefully, the best thing you could do, working in a psych unit is, having someone keeping them safe, helping them figure out their next step, give them some recommendations, provide them with some services, and then just do your best not to traumatize them, and make the best out of a good experience, right? Because a lot of people have, trauma from being in those units, and it makes sense as to why. Oh yeah, the 15-minute checks every 15 minutes. Hey, usually, I think from what I remember, it'd be like, an hour check. Unless if you're on the 15-minute, then, you were potentially they would deem you at a higher risk to do the 15-minute checks. Because if you're doing 15-minute checks on everyone, by the time you're done with the first round of checks, then you're already going back around. You're just doing checks the whole time. I can't remember though. I think it was hourly, maybe 30-minute. Oh, you were 1-to-1. Yeah, so if like you're 1-to-1. I spent many times on those 1-to-1s, sometimes overnight 1-to-1s. Those are the best because, hopefully you're sleeping. You just sit there and read a book or something, or I get homework done. But those grippy socks are good. I got a couple pairs, not from the psych unit, but from hospital stays of other reasons. All right, so let's see, is there any other statistics that I missed? And again, if you missed some of these, we talked about a lot of the different variables for why people are happy at the jobs they do. What are people looking for? And then at the end of the day, especially if you are a manager, an employer, how to keep your employees, how to retain them, but also how to keep them happy, and more productive, right? So let's see. So like we said before, 80% of people quit their jobs because they feel undervalued. 93% of people will stay longer with an organization to invest in their career growth. So I think we've basically hit all of these. And then the last thing I said that we were going to talk about is, well, how much money is ideal to make, right? You would say, well, being a billionaire would be nice. And sure, it is. But again, based on, stop flashing, So, like, based on that statistic of how few people actually quit their jobs because of money, I mean, that shows you that money could only take you so far, right? Money could only take you so far. There's so many more factors to happiness than money. But what I find with folks is that not having enough money to meet your basic needs and to have consistent financial stress really does affect your happiness. So it's like at some point making so there's a few, let's just say there's a few different levels to the game. One level is I'm not making enough money to meet my basic needs. I'm financially stressed out, right? That's level one, and that will have a very negative impact on your happiness. Now, when you get to, let's say, depending on where you live, somewhere like an income of like household income 75,000, 90,000, something like that, right? So now you're like at a place where hopefully you don't have just a ton of financial stress and pressure. Because if you look at like other statistics as far as like divorces, like a very high percentage of divorces are due to differences in financial, views, financial values, but also financial stress. So that's a big factor in divorce. So like, let's say that's the mid level, right? Of making enough money to feel like, you're not stressed about it all the time, that you can, yes, exactly like Maslow's hierarchy, because again, you can't focus on some of those higher levels of self-actualization, because you're too busy focused on, well, how am I going to get my next meal? How am I going to pay my bills? Am I going to get kicked out of my living situation? How do I pay my utilities? I mean, it's stuff like that that will really cause a lot of stress. Because I think at the end of the day, I won't say this for sure, but for a vast amount of people, stress, well, okay, for everyone, the less stress you have, the happier you're going to be and the healthier you're going to be. However, when you get to a certain point, it kind of levels off, right? So the person that makes 100,000 versus 300,000 is probably not going to be, on average, happier, maybe a little bit. But sometimes there becomes more complications. Sometimes, if you look at celebrities, people in the entertainment industry, it's people like lawyers too, right, who tend to make a lot more money or have more notoriety, especially in entertainment and fame, right? The addiction rates are much higher, right? So why? Well, they're making more money. Shouldn't they be happier? So you're saying you make 53 in a law firm. Now, what do you do at the law firm? And right now, actually, law is really tough to get into because it's extremely competitive. So the wages have gone down now, unless you're doing accounting. Yeah. So like sometimes, like as far as just being a lawyer, unless you're graduating from like a really prestigious school, it could be really hard to get one of those high paying law jobs. And then even the people who have those high paying law jobs are often miserable and there's so much pressure for billing hours, and you're working much more than 40 hours a week. And that's really stressful, and people cope with drugs, and, we all know how that leads to happiness. So again, there's almost a point of diminishing returns, or at the very least, there's other factors that go along with making a lot more money than what you're, than what you need to live a basic, decent existence as far as getting your needs met. So that's the boat that you're in, working in law. You just started. So yeah, not always the best route to go, or at least it's just harder right now. So that's why you're starting to stop doing drugs, Mary. That is awesome. Keep it up. Keep trying, and you'll get there. I have good faith in you. So, okay, so that's level 2, is making enough. Now, then there's another level, and that level is freedom. Having enough money to buy freedom, meaning, you have more flexibility over work, you have more flexibility in your personal life, to get some of the finer things, to have that, second home, a lake home, to not have to worry as much about, thinking about like, can I afford this organic watermelon versus a regular watermelon, right? One of my favorite authors, Yuval Noah Harari. I remember I heard in an interview, because his book blew up, and all of a sudden, he's making more money. And I think he was saying, this makes sense. He's like, pretty much like the best thing about being rich, or like one of the, like kind of like the maximum level of how it's going to make you happy is like when you go to a restaurant or when you go to a grocery store and you don't have to worry about how much something is. Oh, these are organic mango slices. Those are $7. Like, all right, well, I want it. Right? Or he lives in Israel and he was like, in Israel, a pineapple is extremely expensive, but he has enough money, so he just buys the pineapple. And so I think there's something to that as far as the psychology of how happy uh, you may be, right? That's kind of another level of financial freedom and independence. I see a lot of people working in real estate as well. A lot of people leave their jobs and learn how to invest in real estate because after a certain amount of time you have more financial freedom. Reza just became a top one viewer. Awesome, Reza. I don't know if we've heard much from you, but you've been watching, so that's awesome. You sent a rose. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who's been sticking in this. We're at 600 likes. Feel free to like the live. This has been awesome. You all have participated and really pushed the conversation forward. This has been a lot of fun. But let's finish this last thought and see if you all have any final questions. But, as I was saying, as far as, real estate, a lot of people find freedom because, of the way that they could build wealth, the way that they have more flexibility, right? And then you have like a double whammy because, let's say you like your job, but maybe that's an example. I mean, some people are passionate about real estate. You meet some people who love it, and that is their passion. Awesome. But a lot of people just do that because A, they don't hate it, and B, because of the lifestyle it affords them. Like I know a lot of people who, they don't work a 9 to 5. They'll go do a workout class. They'll, take a day off. They don't, they're not, they don't have a boss, right? So there are a lot of advantages, right? For someone like me who, owns my own businesses, there, the first time I was able to not have a boss, I mean, there is something awesome about that. And even if it's not like, I've always liked my bosses. I've been pretty lucky. I've worked for some really good people, and so it wasn't like a huge source of stress for me. But a lot of times with a boss is like, okay, you feel like you have this certain amount of like work that you like need to do, but then if you're working for yourself, you have that as well, right? But even if you work more for yourself than you would work for someone else, then there's still some kind of psychological, or maybe it's a sense of pride in that, where you're willing to work more for something that you built. But then you also have that flexibility. Now, a lot of times people in their business are like, well, I could take off whenever I want, but I don't, because I really want to keep this thing going, right? And so sometimes that is harder, especially if your businesses are doing well, to be like, oh, I could slack off a little bit. But at the end of the day, especially if you have employees or you have people relying on you, there is a lot of stress and pressure. Now, I would still argue personally, for me, that I enjoy doing that. I have maybe a little bit more of a risk tolerance, and I have other privileges that I've been allotted that have enabled me to do this. A lot of luck, and hopefully a little bit of skill that's been able to get me to this point, and I love it. But I could tell you there's some times that I am just stressed, like super stressed. Is this business going to make it? Am I about to go into a shitload of debt? How am I going to get myself? So there is like a level of fear in that that's hard to describe. A level of stress in that's hard to describe, where you're like, especially if you're like, okay, I'm going to go from this with my business fails and other people under me lose their jobs, and then what am I going to do? I'm in debt, or then I have to go do I have to go work from somewhere else? And then, not only is like, okay, well, that's not that bad. A lot of people do that, but, there's a sense of pride in that too, of I failed, right? Now you could have that elsewhere, but, okay, so, let's go to you guys. I love my team management. The job isn't forever. Yeah, so that was actually a statistic in there too. Is like a certain, maybe it's like 60, or let's say it's like 40% of people, don't see their career as something like that they're going to do long term, right? Especially if you're younger, you're like, okay, I'm not going to take the first job that I get and then stay there. Actually, a lot of people do that, and it was more common back in the day when employers maybe took more pride and value, where kind of almost like a baseball team where it's like people stay with one team for their whole career and don't bounce around based off money. But depending on the industry, you just don't see that as much anymore, and I think that is because of certain toxic corporate cultures that are only about the bottom line. And when people work for those companies, they're more inclined to leave, not just because of the money per se, but again, like we've talked about, because you're not appreciated. Jessica, thank you so much for the compliments. And you said you're finally clean, and that makes me happy as hell. How much recovery time do you have? Share that with us. I know that it's been a struggle for you, and we've seen it, and you deserve that. We care about you here at the ETC show. I don't believe therapists, different lingos. I don't know. Well, I think it was because I made a comment. Oh, so I was being a little sarcastic, but I wasn't. So my intent in that was to kind of make fun of people who, don't understand the cultural lingos, but I know that I didn't provide enough context. And so that question I put on there, obviously that didn't happen in the same way. I was kind of playing off of what she did, and because there was some dark humor in what she did. So I was just trying to make a joke, but make a point. But people have asked me stuff just like that, or they've asked me like, well, what does that mean? Why do they call me that? Right. So that's actually happened, not exactly what I notated. So I don't know. I probably shouldn't have said stuff like that, because people are, it is a sensitive, it really is a sensitive issue. So yeah, so I'm glad you get it, but yeah, it's sensitive, and people, rightfully so. There's a lot there. So, yeah. So I wish I provided a little more context, and I was trying to be slightly humorous in that, but fell on deaf ears, which I probably should have realized. 7 months clean, holy shit! It's been that long. That's awesome. So yeah, maybe I need to go to a re-education camp. And to test for my sins, but no, I don't want to come off that way. I don't want people to think I'm being insensitive. And, I've clearly, if you watch my content, I have a sense of humor. I have a dark sense of humor, and it doesn't always land right. So, yeah. Anyways, we all make mistakes, and hopefully most folks realize that my intent was not to like make fun of that. It's to kind of make fun of people who, don't understand some of that lingo. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully people forget about it, or they could just unfollow me if they're not into it. That's cool too. Well, thanks, Jessica. I appreciate that you like my humor. So any other questions before we hop off? That would be awesome. Otherwise, yeah, we're at, I think I said I'd do an hour and a half, but I think we covered just about everything. So again, thank you all for joining, and if not, feel free to reach out. And again, be sure to follow me on other platforms, YouTube, podcast, because right now this will be posted to both my YouTube and podcast. So you could go back and watch it, where we talk about all of that. Where can you reach out? Yeah, so I have my email. So go on the link tree in my bio, and you could see my podcast, YouTube, Instagram. I even have my email on there, so you could shoot me. And so if you follow all those, so for anyone who follows all of my content, I will send you over some free therapy guides, things that I do with clients, things that you may find to be helpful. So feel free to follow those, shoot me an email. We'll get those things out to you. Sometimes it takes a little bit. Did I know right away what I wanted to specialize in? How did you find out your specialties? That's a really good question. So The addiction thing I fell into because of like personal experiences, but like I said before, I worked a lot with like developmental disabilities, autism. I thought about maybe going into that, but I did like general psychology, and was always attracted to that idea of working with people one on one. And so, but then, with personal stuff got me into addiction, but then eventually going into the broader mental health too. So that's kind of how I did. And, so a lot of people like in mental health go into it for those reasons because, their own experiences, wanting to give back in a way, wanting to even understand it a little bit more on a personal level. So you said motivation or discipline. Can you tell me a little bit more about that question and what that means? Because I am kind of interested. So is what, in what context? Nancy, good to see you. Do I think therapy could be counterproductive if you're not processing trauma and just ruminating? Yeah, I think at a certain point, yes. I mean, because the question is, what is in your treatment plan? What are your goals? Sometimes if clients are coming in and we're just kind of working on the drama of the week or something like we all have, right? Like, oh, this happened or me. There is benefit to getting that off your chest and processing that, but I do think, it's like past, present, and future. Sometimes, with certain clients, if we get off track or if we're not maybe processing some of the past stuff, because it really is easy to get hung up in the here and now. So, like, sometimes with clients, I'll divide it up. Like, we'll say, all right, the first 20 minutes, let's talk about whatever happened, whatever you want this week. Let's just, throw it out there, piss and moan, let's do it. I think we all need that a bit, right? But then kind of the second 20 minutes is, let's talk a little bit about the solution. Let's talk about coping skills. Let's talk about how we can more effectively handle these situations. And then at the end, let's talk about the past. Let's talk about how these things connect to the past. So that's like kind of a model that I kind of thought of, and for certain clients that works well for. And at least in the back of my head, I kind of think about that. Is like, all right, what do we need to clear out? What steam do we need to blow off? But then, so it really is easy though to get caught up in that, and sometimes you're not getting all the benefit that if you were to focus on that area as well, because a lot of people do come for that, and sometimes you may not make any progress. So if that happens, it's good to have that conversation with your therapist, or your therapist have that conversation with you of like, okay, let's take a look at the treatment plan again. Let's look at the original reasons why you came. Let's look at your goals. What progress have we made? What areas have maybe there haven't been as much progress or that we haven't focused on? And how could we change things up and be mindful to stick to that new plan? That's where I think a treatment plan can be really beneficial, because a lot of times you just do it to do it because of the insurance company. We all do that, and okay, go ahead and feel free to sign it, and then we never think about it again. But I think that is one of the benefits to doing it, for sure, is that you can track progress and goals just like you would in any medical intervention. So you're right, yeah, it's not a one size fits all with therapists. You're going to vibe better with other people, but sometimes I think there is value. I've talked about this in a lot of my videos of having that open, honest conversation with your therapist to see if you can, because again, as therapists, we're not mind readers, so maybe we think you're getting what you want, but we don't always know. So, and sometimes we can change our approach a little bit, because I recognize not everyone, I don't take the same approach with everyone. So I'm just kind of doing the best I can. So, yeah. Can religion cause mental health issues? That is a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think there's something I would call it, and not, I don't like make this up, but like toxic religiosity, because for some, religion can be a good benefit. There is research that, there are many benefits to religion. Not that I, do any of that, but others do. A lot of people do benefit, a sense of community, a sense of purpose. So it fills a lot of these needs. However, when it becomes too rigid, ideological, and shaming, and abusive, then yes, I mean, a lot of people seek therapy for religious trauma. So, well, Jess, we appreciate you waking up early in Australia for this. You got work in 2 hours. Hopefully you have a better day at work. even though it's maybe not the ideal job for you right now. But yeah, that's a great question. User 186388276. Thank you for participating. You asked some great questions. We hope to see you around more. Hope you all are following. We got Ashlyn. What's up, Ashlyn, over in the UK? Happy you're not working anymore this week. All right, yeah. So that's another thing too. And the more you can enjoy your time off, take care of yourself, then sometimes the more refreshed you are to get back into work and do some of that hard stuff. So, well, anyway, thank you all for joining. Again, go to my link tree, follow me on other stuff, YouTube, podcast, Insta, shoot me an email, let me know that you did. Let's connect, get you some free stuff over. I got a couple good YouTube videos coming. I got a couple good podcasts coming, stuff that you're not going to find on here. Of course, I'm going to keep making a few videos a week for here, so keep your eyes peeled for those. Like them, share them, comment, all that good stuff. But anyways, folks, you have been awesome. This has been a great live. It's been good to see you all. And with that, I will bid you adieu.